Welcome to our deep dive into the world of parasites. You know those little uninvited guests that can really mess with our health. We got some really interesting seminar notes and a blog post sent in by a listener, and I have to say I'm pretty excited to dig into this stuff with you.
Yeah, it's a topic that most people would rather not think about. But the truth is parasitism is incredibly common. I mean, it's basically woven into the fabric of life on Earth.
So it's not just a human problem.
Nope, not at all.
Yeah.
Pretty much every species out there has some kind of relationship with the parasite, whether it's a symbiotic one where both benefit, or the more classic parasitic one, where one benefits at the expense of the other.
Right. And speaking of those less than desirable relationships, you mentioned a pretty unsettling story in the notes about a parasite encounter of your own. Something about a sashimi surprise.
Oh yeah, that was not my favorite culinary experience. So let's just say I learned a valuable lesson about sourcing my seafood carefully.
So what happened exactly?
Well, I thought I was getting some nice fresh fish from a local fisherman, supporting the small guy and all that. Turns out the fish was harboring a little something extra.
A parasite.
Yeah, an Anisaki's worm, to be precise.
Ooh, those are the ones that can, I mean, I don't even want to think about what they can do to your insides.
Yeah, they're not exactly known for their hospitality,
Mm-hmm.
but it really brought home the point that even with all our modern food safety regulations, these risks are still out
I
there.
mean, it makes you think about the whole raw food trend. I mean, it's one thing to eat sushi at a reputable restaurant, but when you're talking about a whole diet based on uncooked food, it seems like you're really increasing your chances of encountering something unwanted.
You're not wrong there. And the thing is, the risk is even higher in warmer climates.
Really? Why is that?
Well, parasites, they thrive in certain environments. Warmth and humidity are like paradise for many of them.
So it's not just about what you eat, but also where you live and where that food is coming from.
Exactly. Think about it like this. You've got traditional cultures, like the Inuit, who eat a lot of raw meat, but they live in the Arctic, where it's freezing cold most of the year. That environment naturally keeps many parasites in check.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got the where and the what, but what about the how? I mean, how do these parasites actually get into our bodies in the first place?
Well, food is definitely a major culprit. Undercooked meat, unwashed produce, even some delicacies like escargot, they can all harbor parasites just waiting for a free ride.
So we're talking about more than just sushi and carpaccio.
Oh yeah, for
And
sure.
then there's the whole issue of hygiene.
Absolutely. Washing your hands thoroughly, especially after handling raw food or being around animals, that's crucial.
What about pets?
Yeah, our furry friends can unfortunately be carriers of parasites. So regular vet checkups and preventative treatments are super important.
This is starting to sound like a minefield. Is there anywhere safe?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but it's important to be aware of the risks and take precautions.
Like what?
Well, for starters, cooking your food thoroughly is huge.
Right, that's kind of a no-brainer.
It is, but you'd be surprised how many people undercook their meat, especially things like chicken and pork.
So we're talking about more than just searing a steak.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need to make sure the internal temperature reaches a safe level to kill any potential parasites.
And what about produce?
Wash it thoroughly under running water. And if possible, use a veggie brush to really get into those nooks and crannies.
Okay, so fire is our friend in the kitchen.
It's definitely been a game changer for humanity, not just for making food more palatable, but also for making it safer.
I remember reading something in the seminar notes about fire playing a crucial role in human evolution.
Oh yeah, it's fascinating. Cooking food at high temperatures not only breaks down tough fibers, but it also kills off a lot of those harmful microorganisms.
It's like a built-in safety mechanism.
Exactly. Our ancestors may not have understood the science behind it, but they knew that cooking made food safer to eat.
It makes you wonder if those early humans were even aware of parasites.
It's hard to say for sure, but they definitely experienced the consequences of eating contaminated food.
Right, sickness, death.
Yeah, it's not a stretch to imagine that they developed certain practices, like cooking over fire,
Yeah.
as a way to mitigate those risks.
It's like culinary natural selection.
Like,
The survival of the fittest eaters.
uh-huh. Yeah, something like that.
So fire was our first line of defense.
And it's still one of the most effective.
But what about other historical examples?
Well, there's the famous case of Dr. John Snow during the London cholera outbreak back in the 1850s.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that.
He noticed that brewery workers who drank beer instead of water, they were less likely to get sick.
So alcohol was protective.
In a way, yes. The fermentation process that produces alcohol also helps to neutralize some pathogens.
So fire and alcohol are ancestors' secret weapons.
It's funny how some of those ancient staples
Hmm.
turned out to have some pretty powerful benefits.
It's like they were unknowingly engaging in germ warfare.
Yeah, without even realizing it.
But what about those of us who enjoy a good carpaccio or a medium rare burger? It sounds like we're playing with fire a bit,
Well, there's definitely a risk involved with eating raw or undercooked food.
especially in today's world where food travels all over the place.
You're right about that. It's much harder to control the entire supply chain.
So vigilance is key.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Know where your food is coming from, prepare it safely,
Mm.
and be aware of the potential risks.
Okay, so food is one way these parasites can sneak into our lives. But what about other less obvious routes?
Well, our beloved pets can unfortunately be a source.
Really?
Yep, dogs and cats can carry parasites that can be transmitted to humans.
So snuggling with your pup could be risky.
It's all about taking precautions.
Uh-huh.
Regular vet checkups, deworming medication, those are crucial for keeping both you and your pet healthy.
And what about kids? I mean, they're always putting their hands in their mouths.
That's why it's so important to teach them good hygiene habits, washing their hands frequently, especially after playing outside or being around animals.
And what about those public sandboxes?
Yeah, those can be a breeding ground for parasites. It's best to avoid them if possible, or at least make sure your kids wash their hands thoroughly afterwards.
This is making me rethink my next trip to the park.
It's all about being aware of the risks and taking sensible precautions.
And speaking of unexpected sources, I remember the notes mentioned something about pigeons.
Oh yeah, those feathered friends can be more dangerous than they look.
In what way?
Their droppings can contain parasite eggs, and those eggs can become airborne and be inhaled,
So even just walking through a park could be risky.
especially if there's a lot of pigeon activity.
Okay, I'm officially adding pigeons to my list of things to avoid.
It's not about being paranoid,
Yeah.
just informed.
So we've talked about how these parasites get in, but what happens once they're inside? What kind of damage can they do?
Well, it depends on the type of parasite and the overall health of the host. But some common effects include weakened immune system, nutrient deficiencies, and even anemia.
So they're not just a nuisance, they can actually make us really sick.
Yes, and in some cases they can even be fatal.
That's scary.
It is, but the
Yeah.
good news is that there are ways to protect ourselves and to treat parasitic infections if they do occur.
We'll definitely get into that. But first, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about parasites potentially influencing our behavior.
Oh yeah, that's a fascinating and somewhat unsettling aspect of this topic.
I mean, I read about those zombie ants in the blog post.
Right, the Ophiocordyceps unilateralis fungus.
That's some seriously creepy stuff.
It is pretty wild. This fungus infects ants and essentially takes control of their brains, forcing them to climb to a specific location where the fungus can release its spores.
It's like something out of a science fiction movie.
Yes, a pretty extreme example, but it shows just how powerful these parasites can be.
And it makes you wonder if they could be manipulating us in ways we don't even realize.
That's a question that scientists are still exploring. We know that the microbiome, the community of microorganisms that live in our gut, plays a significant role in our mental and emotional well-being.
Right, the gut-brain connection.
Exactly. So if those microorganisms can influence our mood and even our cognitive function, it's not a stretch to think that parasites could be doing the same.
That's a little freaky.
It is, but it's also incredibly fascinating.
But I guess we'll have to delve deeper into that in a future episode.
Definitely a topic worth exploring further.
But for now, let's get back to more practical matters, like what we can do to protect ourselves from these invaders.
Okay, good idea.
The seminar notes mention some natural remedies.
Right. There are a number of plants and herbs that have anti-parasitic properties.
Like what?
Well, garlic is a classic one. It's been used for centuries to combat all sorts of infections, including those caused by parasites.
I've also heard that pumpkin seeds are good.
Yes, those are another traditional remedy. They contain compounds that can paralyze and expel certain types of worms.
So we're talking about more than just old wives' tales.
Oh, yeah. Many of these natural remedies have been backed up by scientific studies.
And what about those traditional food pairings, like wasabi and ginger with sushi?
Those are great examples. Wasabi and ginger aren't just for taste. They actually have anti-parasitic properties that help to combat any unwanted stowaways that might be lurking in the raw fish.
So there's a reason why those flavors go together.
Exactly. It's a delicious and effective way to protect yourself.
I'm starting to see food in a whole new light. as both nourishment and protection.
That's a great way to think about it.
But what if we suspect we already have a parasite? Are there any more direct approaches to address that?
Well, there's one method that's quite effective, though perhaps not for the faint of heart.
Ooh, you're talking about the vitamin C flush.
Yep, that's the one.
I read about that in the blog post and it sounded pretty intense.
It can be. But it can also be incredibly effective at eliminating intestinal parasites.
So how does it work exactly?
Essentially, you dissolve a high dose of vitamin C powder in water and drink it on an empty stomach.
And then what?
Well, let's just say it creates a very rapid and thorough cleansing of the bowels.
Okay, that sounds pretty brutal.
It's not exactly a spa treatment, but it can be very effective at flushing out parasites.
I have to admit, I'm a little skeptical.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone. And it's definitely important to consult with a doctor before trying anything like this.
That's good advice. So while natural remedies can be helpful, professional medical guidance is still crucial.
Absolutely. Especially if you're dealing with a severe infection.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from how parasites get into our bodies, to the damage they can cause, and even some natural ways to fight back.
Yeah, it's a complex topic, but I think the most important takeaway is that we're not helpless.
Right, knowledge is power.
Exactly. The more we understand about these organisms, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves and our loved ones.
This has been an incredible deep dive, and I'm sure our listeners are feeling a lot more informed and maybe a little bit grossed out.
That's understandable.
But hey, sometimes the truth is a little bit icky.
That's life.
So what's next on our parasite adventure?
Well, there's still a lot more to explore. We could delve deeper into the gut-brain connection, or look at the role of parasites in different ecosystems.
That sounds fascinating.
It is. These creatures are everywhere, and they play a much bigger role in our world than most people realize.
This whole conversation is making me realize that we need to approach our health from a more holistic perspective,
I agree.
recognizing the interconnectedness of our bodies, our food, and the environment.
It's all connected.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for a little break.
Okay, that sounds good.
We'll be back soon to wrap up this deep dive and leave you with some final thoughts to ponder.
Looking forward to it. Yeah, they can really mess you up.
So they're not just a nuisance. They can actually make us really sick.
Oh, absolutely. In some cases, they can even be fatal.
Okay, wow.
But the good news is that there are ways to protect ourselves and to treat those infections if they do happen.
Okay, well, we'll get to that. But first, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about parasites potentially influencing our behavior.
Oh, yeah. That's a really fascinating aspect of this whole thing. And kind of creepy, too.
Yeah, I was reading about those zombie ants in the blog post.
Right. The Ophiocordyceps unilateralis fungus.
That's some seriously scary stuff.
It is. It's pretty wild. Basically, this fungus, it infects ants.
Yeah.
And then takes control of their brains.
And then makes them climb to a specific spot.
Exactly. So the fungus can release its spores and spread.
Okay, that's like straight out of a science fiction movie.
Yeah, it's a pretty extreme example. But it really shows you how powerful these parasites can be.
So they can actually manipulate their hosts.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it makes you wonder, could they be doing the same thing to us?
That's a question that scientists are still exploring. But we do know that the microbiome, the community of microorganisms that live in our gut, that plays a huge role in our mental and emotional health.
Like the gut-brain connection.
Exactly. So if those tiny organisms can influence our mood and even our cognitive function, it's not a huge leap to think that parasites could be doing the same.
Okay, that's a little freaky.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
I guess we'll have to dive deeper into that in a future episode.
Definitely a topic worth exploring further.
But for now, let's get back to some more practical stuff, like what we can do to protect ourselves from these invaders.
Right. Okay. Good idea.
The seminar notes mention some natural remedies.
Yeah. There are a lot of plants and herbs that have anti-parasitic properties.
Like what? What are some examples?
Well, garlic is a classic one. It's been
Okay.
used for centuries to fight infections,
Yeah.
including those caused by parasites.
Garlic, yeah, I've heard that. What about pumpkin seeds?
Yep. Those are another good one. They contain compounds that can basically paralyze certain types of worms.
So they can't move and then they get flushed out.
Exactly.
So we're talking about more than just, old wives' tales here.
Oh, yeah. A lot of these natural remedies, they've actually been backed up by scientific studies.
That's good to know. And what about those traditional food pairings, like wasabi and ginger with sushi?
Oh, yeah. Those are great examples. They're not just for taste. Wasabi and ginger, they actually have anti-parasitic properties.
Really?
Yeah, helps to combat any unwanted hitchhikers that might be lurking in the raw fish.
So there's actually a reason why those flavors go so well together.
Exactly. It's a delicious way to protect yourself.
I'm starting to look at food in a whole new light now.
I know, me too. It's
Well,
fascinating.
but what if we suspect we already have a parasite? What can we do then?
Well, there's one method that's pretty effective, though it's not for the faint of heart.
Okay, you're talking about the vitamin C flush?
Yep, that's the one.
I read about that in the blog post, and it sounded pretty intense.
It can be, yeah. But it can also be really good at getting rid of intestinal parasites.
So how does it work?
Basically, you dissolve a high dose of vitamin C powder in water and drink it on an empty stomach.
And let's just say it leads to a very rapid and thorough cleansing of the bowels.
Okay, so it gives you diarrhea,
Basically, yeah, it's not exactly a spa treatment.
but it flushes out the parasites.
Right, it creates this kind of flood that washes everything out.
Okay. I have to admit, I'm a little skeptical.
I understand. It's definitely not for everyone, and it's important to talk to your doctor before trying anything like this.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
So while natural remedies can be helpful, it's always best to get professional medical guidance.
Absolutely, especially if you're dealing with a serious infection.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from how parasites get into our bodies to the damage they can cause, and even some ways to fight back.
Yeah, it's a complex topic for sure.
But I think that the main takeaway is that we're not helpless.
Exactly. Knowledge is power.
Right.
The more we understand about these organisms, the
Hmm.
better we can protect ourselves and the people we care about.
This has been an amazing deep dive. I'm sure our listeners are feeling a lot more informed now.
I hope that. And maybe a little bit grossed out too.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's understandable.
But hey, sometimes the truth is a little bit icky.
That's true.
So what's next on our parasite adventure?
Well, there's still so much to explore. We could look more into the gut-brain connection or the role of parasites in different ecosystems.
That sounds fascinating.
It is these creatures, they're everywhere. And they play a much bigger role in the world than most people realize.
You know, this whole conversation is making me realize that we need to approach health from a much broader perspective,
I agree.
recognizing the connection between our bodies, our food, and the environment.
It's all connected.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for a little break.
Okay, sounds good.
We'll be back soon to wrap up this deep dive and leave you with some final thoughts to ponder.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of parasites.
It's good to be back.
We've covered a lot of ground, from their sneaky tactics to their impact on our health, and even some natural ways to fight back.
Yeah, we've really gone deep, haven't we?
I'm curious, as we wrap up this exploration, what stands out to you the most from all this information?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's the sheer diversity of these creatures. You know, they've evolved these incredible survival strategies, and they've managed to carve out these niches in virtually every corner of the planet.
Yeah, it's amazing and a little bit terrifying at the same time.
Definitely.
And it really makes you realize that we're all part of this interconnected web of life.
Right. We can't just ignore them. They're here to stay.
And understanding those relationships, even the ones that make us squirm a little, that's crucial to understanding our own place in the world.
Absolutely.
So we've learned about the challenges, but what about solutions? What can we do to protect ourselves and stay ahead of these clever invaders?
Well, I think that the most important thing is to keep the conversation going, you know, to share this knowledge, to encourage curiosity, and to foster a deeper understanding of this complex interplay between humans and parasites.
So it's not just about personal awareness, it's about creating a more informed community.
Exactly. The more we understand about these organisms, the better equipped we are to navigate our own health and the health of the planet as a whole.
This deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening, and I'm sure our listeners feel the same way.
I hope so.
We've covered a lot of ground, but I have a feeling this is just the beginning of a much larger exploration.
It always is. There's so much more to learn.
The world of parasites is vast and endlessly fascinating. And who knows what other secrets we might uncover as we continue to delve deeper into this hidden realm.
The possibilities are endless.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the fascinating, albeit sometimes unsettling world of parasites.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure joining you on this journey.
It's been great having you here.
And remember, everyone, knowledge is power. The more we understand about the world around us, even the parts that make us squirm a bit, the better equipped we are to live healthy and fulfilling lives.
And maybe invest in some high-quality wasabi and ginger.
Excellent.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and maybe avoid those pigeons in the park.
Wise words, farewell.